What's up guys, this is Voxide and welcome to another After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial we're gonna be creating this nice high-tech logo reveal, and this technique you can use for your text as well. And as you can see here, I just have a V-letter that I'm using as sort of like a logo placer, but you can go ahead and swap this for your logo, and feel free to use this as an intro for your personal projects and whatever you want. You can download the project files by following the link in the description of this video. And before I get started, I will also be using my utility box script, and you can also follow the link for the download in the description. And once you're on the utility box page, you can check out all the instructions on how to install this. And after you've installed it, you can go ahead and run it from a window. And here you can see I already have it loaded, utility box version 1.6. And let's go ahead and get started. So I will create a new composition, and I will make this full HD, and I will make this 300 frames long, which is 10 seconds, and hit OK. I'll go ahead and grab my text tool, and I will just type letter V, and let's reposition this. And I'm using Bank Gothic as the font, and let's go ahead and reposition this. So if you hold Ctrl and Shift while repositioning, you will snap the layer to center, like so. And I will rename this composition actually to our main comp. And let's go ahead and pre-compose this text layer, and I will press Ctrl-Shift-C to pre-compose, and let's rename this to logo holder. Let's step inside this composition now, and I will go to the composition settings for this guy, and I will try to make the width and height of this composition to match roughly the bounds of our logo. And I will just decrease the width until it sort of starts touching our logo. So let's try maybe a value of 1000. Let's also decrease the height. So maybe let's try a value of 725 for this guy. Alright, let's head back in our main comp. Let's actually create a background, so Ctrl-Y for new layer. I will name this to background. Let's go ahead and add a effect, generate, and ramp. Let's switch this to a radial ramp. For my start color, I'm gonna go with a blue. And for my end color, I'm gonna go with a black. And I will reposition these colors a bit, and maybe make this more desaturated, and maybe add a little more green to this blue, and this should be fine. Let's place this below our logo holder layer, and let's grab my utility box script. So run this, and you can see I have it docked over here, and I will select this logo holder layer, and if I go to my grid tab, I can go ahead and now split this layer. So make sure your logo layer is selected, and I will choose maybe 12 by 12, and I will also select linked to be on, and for my transition method I'm gonna use radial. Alright, and you can experiment with linear and noise as well. These will give different results which you can try out, but for this tutorial I'm gonna be using radial. And now if I hit split, and let's go ahead and close this now. This will now take care of the setup, and you can see here that I can grab individual pieces and I can move them around. And if I unhide all of my layers and click this button, you can see here that here we have all of our individual pieces. Alright, and let's go ahead and actually I will let's go to our background layer, and I'm gonna hide this for now. And let's go ahead and just grab some of these layers and just delete them, just so we make things a lot easier and faster. And actually, if I go in my logo holder layer and press Ctrl-Y to make a new solid, I will make this solid 20% opacity. So hit T and switch to 20% opacity, and head back in my main comp. You can kind of see what this does, and I can go ahead now and just grab these layers and just try to clean this shape up a bit. Just grab layers and just delete everything I don't need. And this looks fine, and now I can go back in my original layer and just delete this white solid and go back in my main comp. And let's turn on my background layer, and let's also turn on hide all the layers. Alright, and just keep things more organized. So what I want to do now is add a new camera. So layer, new camera. I'm using an angle view of 75 degrees and hit OK. Let's go and add a null object as well. And let's make this null object 3D. So press F4 and switch this layer to a 3D layer. And let's rename this to cam target. I will now parent this camera layer to our camera target, and this will just make it easier to animate our camera. And if I press P for position, I can go ahead and right click this position value and choose separate dimensions. And now if I animate this Z position value, we can really easily create a zoom out or zoom in animation, camera animation, right? So let's set our ending point to be maybe somewhere around negative 850. Add a keyframe at frame 300. Let's go to our first frame and let's set another value for our Z position. So let's maybe go with maybe 3000 should be good, so roughly 3000. And if I go in my custom view, you can kind of see the animation here, right? So this is our camera movement. Let's grab both of these keyframes and press F9 to turn them into smooth keyframes. And now if I select this Z position property and go to my graph editor, you can see this is the curve that's affecting our keyframes. And let's edit these handles a bit. So if you select the first handle and hold shift, you can readjust the handles. And I will do the same for this guy. Only this guy, I'm just gonna drag this over and just slow things down towards the end. And I'm gonna leave this animation as it is for now. And I'm gonna go to my transition controls and I will animate this transition completion from 0 to 100, and we'll see what that does in a second. And I'm just gonna add a keyframe at the first frame for 0. And if I press U, this will give me my keyframe information. Let's go to 125 and let's add another keyframe for 100, right? And now if I go in my transition controls, I can readjust all of these settings and everything will create a different effect. So let's go ahead and just see what position X does. So now I'm affecting this transition only on the X position, and if I go to my transition controls, I can turn on the feather a bit, and this will just create a much smoother effect, and you can kind of see what we're getting here. And I can also increase the displace amount and size, and this will just create a little bit more variation to our transition. And now if I scroll my timeline, you can kind of see the effect we're getting here, right? And we can also affect multiple values at the same time, as you can see, and just create a bunch of interesting effects with this. I'm gonna let you play around with these settings as much as you want, but for this tutorial I'm only gonna be using the position Z value here. So let's step back inside our active camera and see exactly what we're doing. And let's see if we increase the position Z value. Okay, let's choose another frame here. So let's actually just use a value of maybe 2000. And let's grab these keyframes and just delay them a bit. All right. And let's take a look at the animation now. All right, so you can see here that these pieces are coming from behind our logo, and what I actually want is for these pieces to be in front of the logo at the start of the animation. So I will need to set this value to a negative value. So let's just use negative 2000, and so this is more like the original effect. And let's just go to our camera settings and readjust this camera zoom. And I'm just gonna go in my custom view here. And this will just make it easier to readjust everything. Alright, so I'm gonna actually go ahead and for my transition controls, I like the way the pieces are aligned right in this position, so I'm just gonna go ahead and add a keyframe for where they're at right now and delete my original keyframe for 0%, and just keep this new keyframe. And I can go ahead to my null object and press P for position. And let's go to the beginning of our timeline and let's reposition this camera to start a bit earlier. And let's take a look at the animation now. And maybe push it more into space right here on the end. And let's go back in our active camera. Alright, so now this is more like the original effect. Let's also go ahead and grab these keyframes for my transition controls and smooth this out, so F9. And maybe even move these over a bit. And let's make a quick ramp preview to see where we're at. Alright, so not bad, and let's go to our next step. Let's step inside this logo holder comp, and let's rename this actually to logo holder pre-comp. And I will pre-compose this guy again, so Ctrl-Shift-C and rename this to logo holder. And let's see what we can do here. So let's create a new solid, Ctrl-Y. Let's add a noise and grain fractional noise. Set this fractional noise to block and maybe complexity of 2. Let's animate the evolution by using an expression, so Alt and left click this stopwatch. And for my expression I will use time multiplied by 75, and this will just create a simple noise animation. Let's duplicate this logo holder layer. I will place this layer on top of our white solid. Let's go to generate and add a fill to this and switch the color to a 100% white. And the reason I'm using a fill is because I want to use this layer now as a mask for our fractal layer. And what I mean by this is if I go to my solid layer now and press F4, I can set this to be Luma Matte for my logo holder. And now you can see it's using the layer above it as a mask. I will go ahead and add a new adjustment layer. So let's add a new adjustment layer. Let's go to Effect, Stylize, and choose Find Edges. Let's set the find edges to invert, and now you can see what sort of effect this is creating. Let's go ahead actually to our fractal layer and maybe let's increase the complexity a bit just to add a little extra detail over there. And now I can select all of these layers and pre-compose these. Let's set this layer now to add. So now it's overlaying with our original logo layer, and I want to fade this logo layer in towards where the animation for the camera sort of ends. So I will make a keyframe at maybe frame, let's say 75. So press T for opacity. Let's set a keyframe for 0%. Let's move over to maybe frame 125. Let's increase this back to 100%. And now you can see I'm sort of fading in the layer below our pre-comp. And I will also fade this pre-comp layer out. So press T for opacity. Do the same thing in reverse, just fade this layer out. And now this is the resulting animation. And I also want to duplicate this layer. And for this guy, I'm going to set the first opacity keyframe to be maybe 25%. And I'm going to go ahead and step inside this pre-comp 2 layer, grab this fraction noise effect and copy this. Let's go back in our original holder layer. And let's paste this effect on the second logo holder copy that we've created, so Ctrl V. And if I solo this, you can see this just pasted the effect. So this just adds an extra step of detail. And I will also fade this guy out. And this will be the resulting effect. And if I go back in my original comp, so our main comp, you can now see that this is the effect. And you can see we have these dark spots in our pieces, and let's see how we can fix that. Let's go in our logo holder pre-comp. I will press Ctrl Y to add a new white solid, and I will place this white solid below our pre-comp 2, and I will set this guy to be Luma Matte. So now I'm using this solid to mask out our pre-comp 2 layer, and if I toggle on transparency, you can see now that everything is nice and transparent. Alright, so now back in our main comp, everything should look alright now. Let's go ahead now and take care of our particles. So Ctrl Y to add a new layer, and I will rename this to particles. And I will solo this layer for now. Let's go ahead and go to a simulation and particle world. And let's go to the beginning of our timeline and set a birth rate keyframe for maybe 25. And let's press U for our keyframe information, and I will step forward one keyframe and set this to 0. So I'm only generating some particles right in the beginning of our composition. And let's go to maybe frame 125, and let's set the longevity to maybe 10, which should be enough for the length of our composition. Let's go to physics and get rid of all of these settings. So I'm setting everything here to 0. And now in our producer settings, I can go ahead and spread the radius X, Y, and Z. And maybe increase the Z position, or rather decrease. So I'm bringing this whole particle emitter closer to our camera. And this is the resulting animation. Let's go ahead now and create a texture for our particles. So Ctrl Y to add a new layer. And I will pre-compose this guy and name this to particle texture. Let's step inside this composition. Let's set this composition to be maybe 120 by 120. And I'll go ahead and delete this layer. And I'm switching over to rounded rectangle tool. And if I double click, this will add a new layer, a new shape layer. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer and switch the fill for this layer to white. I'm going to set this layer to be 35%. And I will duplicate my original layer again. And let's place this layer at the top. And press U twice for our settings and just decrease the size for this guy and maybe decrease the roundness. And let's also decrease the roundness for our original layer. So press U twice and set the roundness maybe to 10. And do the same for this other guy and set it to 10. Alright, so this is our starting point for our particles. Let's head back in our main comp, and we won't be needing to see this layer, so I will unsolo this layer and also hide this layer. Let's step back in our particles layer, and for my particle I'm gonna go ahead and set the particle type to texture the square. And for my texture I'm gonna use the layer that we've just added, so particle texture. And now you can see the effect. And let's set the color map to be origin constant, so this will make our particles the same color throughout the whole composition. And maybe add an effect, color correction tint, and just use this to color our particles. So maybe switch this to a nice blue, hit OK there, and let's unsolo this and see how this looks. Alright, and I will press F4 and set this layer to add. And this will just get rid of the black spot in the center of our particles. I will go ahead and duplicate this layer now. And for the second layer, let's solo this layer and go to Effect, Color Correction, Curves, and maybe increase the contrast for my RGB and also increase the contrast for my alpha channel. Let's go back to my RGB channel and just increase the contrast until I'm sort of trying to filter out just the border part. So maybe increase the highlights, and maybe this should be fine. Alright, and I will go ahead and add a stylized glow to this, and I will duplicate this glow, and for my second glow I'm just gonna increase the glow radius. And let's unsolo this. And I will grab my original particles layer, so the first one, and duplicate this guy again. And let's solo this guy. Let's go to extras and let's change the random seed for this. And if I go to my effects and add a camera lens blur, I can set this now to a radius of maybe 15. And let's try another random seed here and maybe set this to 10. And this layer will just add a bit of variety to our particles and just create a more detailed look. And I can also set this particle layer to maybe 50% opacity. So just fade them out a bit. And I will grab all of these particle layers, press T for opacity, set a keyframe for the opacity to where they're at, and maybe towards frame, or maybe over a course of 100 frames, I will just fade these out to 0. And let's maybe adjust the keyframes and make them make the fade out start a little faster. Let's also go to our background layer, and I will duplicate this layer, and let's solo this duplicate and rename this guy to grid, and I will get rid of this ramp and go to effect, generate, and use grid, and let's press F4 and turn this into a 3D layer. Let's go to the ending of our animation, and I'm going to go ahead and press P4 position and just push this into Z space. So maybe around a value of 3000, and let's grab this layer now and rescale this to fit the entire composition. And I'm gonna set the border for this to be maybe 1, and just tighten up this grid now by using the corner property. And I think this will be fine. And let's go ahead and also add a fractional noise to this and set the noise to block. Let's set the transform scale to be maybe 25, and let's set the evolution to be maybe 2. And this will just break up our pattern and create a more interesting detailed look. And I will also add a tint as well and set the tint to be maybe a nice blue. And let's unsolo this. And I will just decrease the opacity for this layer, so maybe let's use 35%, and this should be fine. I will go ahead and add a new adjustment layer now, and I want to place this adjustment layer right above our transform controls, and I will go ahead and add a time and choose CC Force Motion Blur, and here you can see that this effect adds some nice motion blur to our pieces, which will smooth out our entire animation. And I can go ahead and create a new adjustment layer, and this will be my color correction layer. Let's go ahead and choose a color correction tint. Let's use maybe a value of, let's try 35. Let's go ahead and add a curves and maybe increase the contrast. Let's go to my red channel and decrease the highlight for the red. Alright, and let's go to our blue channel and maybe decrease the shadows for our blue channel. And maybe let's go back to our background and make this a brighter color, and maybe more towards a green. Let's also go ahead and add a stylized glow. And let's increase the glow radius to maybe 50%. And maybe decrease the threshold to 80%. And I will also animate the intensity for this glow. And let's go to a frame where our logo is formed. So maybe somewhere around 150. Let's move over a couple more frames. So at 155 I will set a keyframe for glow intensity, and I will just set another keyframe for glow intensity at 0 and maybe frame 211. Alright? And let's make a quick RAM preview and see what we got. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this tutorial. If you learned anything new, make sure to drop a like, subscribe and stay tuned for more tutorials, and I'm out. But for this tutorial I'm only